Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of biology. In this episode, I want to teach you about the shoot system and also the root system. Now, the shoot system is everything about a plant that's above the ground, all the parts that you can see. It's responsible for the transportation of resources, the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide, reproduction, carrying out photosynthesis in the leaves. The root system is everything below the ground, and that's responsible for absorbing water and nutrients from the soil. It's also responsible for anchoring the plant. So let's have a closer look at these shoot and root systems. We'll start with the root system actually. Now, the root system is responsible for anchoring the plant, absorbing water and minerals. It's the main storage tissue for many plants, and the roots also have these hair-like projections coming off them, and that serves to increase the surface area of the root system. With greater surface area comes a greater rate of diffusion. So what is the root system diffusing? Well, because the root system is below the ground, it can't undergo photosynthesis. It can only undergo cellular respiration. And so therefore, the root system diffuses out CO2 and diffuses in O2. And that's because it's undergoing cellular respiration only. It's unable to undergo photosynthesis because, of course, it can't see any sunlight. Now, the root system also diffuses water into it by osmosis. So hopefully the word osmosis sounds familiar to you. And within the soil, you'll find pockets of air and pockets of water that the root is able to absorb. Mineral ions also enter the root hairs by diffusion and active transport. Let's have a closer look at this process. So here I've got another diagram. Here is my root hair, and here is the main root tissue. This root hair is buried amongst soil particles, and because of the properties of water, you've got a thin layer of water, a film of water surrounding each soil particle and around the root cells themselves. Now, water enters the root hairs by osmosis, and dissolved ions require diffusion and active transport to make their way in. But once they are in, they make their way through the root cells. Water passes across the root from cell to cell by osmosis. It also seeps between the cells as well. Now, the epidermis of the root is the outside layer of the root system, the very outside that you can touch with your hands. And you can also touch the root hairs with your hands. But this is inside of the root, the inside tissue, and water will make its way via osmosis all the way to the xylem. And once the water reaches the xylem, it's forced upwards to the rest of the plant. It travels upwards, up the stem or up the trunk. Now, water is drawn up the xylem vessels because transpiration is constantly removing water from the top of them. And we're going to have a look at transpiration in much closer detail in this episode. Which brings us to the shoot system. So the shoot system, we'll start by looking at the leaves, and we'll look at a special structure called the stomata that's found mostly on the underside of a leaf. On the underside of a leaf, you've got these openings called stomata, and they look like this under the microscope. Pretty cool looking structures. Now, these stomatas control the exchange of gases and also water. The plant needs some control as to what it's exchanging with its environment. So, for example, when the stomata is open, CO2 is able to diffuse in to power photosynthesis, and O2 diffuses out as a waste product. Now, when the holes are open, water is also able to evaporate or transpire out of it. Let's have a closer look at the structure of these stomata. So stomata, singular stoma, are the pores in a leaf mostly found on the undersurface. Each pore is surrounded by a pair of guard cells, and well, that's what these structures here are. Guard cells can change shape to open or close the stoma, and this is really important for a plant. When the plant has access to lots of water, the cell will become swollen or turgid. The guard cell will become turgid. And this gives guard cells an interesting shape. When guard cells are turgid, it actually opens the stoma here, allowing gas exchange. But if there's not much water available, or if it's a very hot day and water has escaped out of the guard cells shrink or become flaccid. And when guard cells become flaccid, the hole, the stoma, closes. Now, when the stoma closes, that prevents water from escaping, which is good. However, this also prevents, or at least slows down, CO2 being able to diffuse into the leaf cell. And if CO2 can't get in, that means photosynthesis can't take place. So plant cells have got this really important balancing act that they have to manage. They need to protect their water content from the sun, but they also need to be able to absorb CO2 from the environment. And so they manage this balance through the opening and closing of their stomata. Let's have a closer look at a leaf structure here. So this is a leaf cross-section, meaning that this is the thickness of a leaf. This is the top of the leaf here, and this is the underside of the leaf here, where we find most of the stoma. The underside of the leaf, when the guard cells are open, this means that water vapor evaporates out of them or transpires out of them. It also allows CO2 to diffuse into the plant cell, allowing photosynthesis to take place. And so this is what the plant has to balance. It's not allowing too much water to escape, but allowing CO2 in so that the plant can undergo photosynthesis. Now, this water escaping has another really important purpose, and it's to do with transpiration. So let's have a closer look at transpiration now. This diagram here is showing transpiration. Transpiration is the process where the sun evaporates the water out of the leaves, and this serves an important purpose. Think back to the last episode of biology where we had a look at the properties of water. Water likes to stick to itself, right? So when water at the top of the plant is being drawn out, because it's sticky with each other, it pulls water beneath it upwards as well, and water underneath that upwards, and underneath that upwards, and so on and so forth. And the effect is, through the power of the sun and the process of transpiration, water is pulled up the entire stem until, of course, it escapes at the very top. And as water is pulled up the stem, that of course brings up nutrients and dissolves solutes for the plant to use as well. So transpiration plays a really important process in terms of moving water up the plant itself. Now, this force of transpiration is actually called the transpirational pull, and the stream of water through the stem of the plant is called the transpiration stream. Now, think back to the other factors, the other properties of water that also help the movement of water up the stem. We had a look at capillarity. So because of the thinness of the xylem, capillarity also plays a part in forcing the water, allowing the water to climb up the stem all the way to the top. And you've also got osmotic pressure at the root here. Water is forcing its way into the root system. So the water is pushing itself in, the sun is sucking it up, and the microscopic nature of the xylem allows water to climb up. Those three variables allow water to climb from the root system all the way to the top of the tallest trees, 100 meters into the air. That's how powerful the combination of osmotic pressure, capillarity, and transpiration can be. Through those three forces, you can draw water up from the roots 100 meters up into the sky for the world's tallest trees. I reckon that's pretty cool. When you're taking your notes today, ensure that you're using diagrams to support and help your note taking as well. I've got another diagram here that has a little bit more details in terms of the structure that you can use, or you can use this diagram as part of your notes. That actually brings us to the end of this particular episode. I'd ask that you take some notes from this PowerPoint and also have a look at your Jacaranda textbook page 181 to 186. Take some notes from these pages as well. I'd ask that you complete Biozone pages 93 to 94. Please don't neglect your Biozone, it's very important. And before finishing up today's lesson, try to answer these recap questions at least mentally. You don't necessarily have to write them out into your books, although that would be helpful, but at the very least, answer these questions mentally. If you can answer them, you're in a good position. On the next episode, I'm going to show you the setup for your assessed investigation, your assessed practical investigation. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Science, and I will see you in the next episode.